malicious compliance grandfather demanded wedding money, so I boycotted with entire family. The champagne flute slipped from my hand, shattering against my grandfather's marble floor as his words hit me like a physical blow. It's simple, sweetheart. Uncle Richard gets an invitation, or you get nothing. I stared at Grandpa Harold, this man who'd bounced me on his knee as a child, who'd promised just 6 months ago to cover half my wedding costs with tears in his eyes. The same man who was now calmly sipping his bourbon while demanding I invite a sexual predator to my wedding. Grandpa, you know what he did to cousin Sarah? She was 14. My voice cracked, and I hated how small. This wasn't the grandfather who'd taught me to play chess, who'd slipped me $20 bills and winked when Mom wasn't looking. This was Harold Morrison, the ruthless businessman who'd steamrolled anyone who got in his way. You're seriously holding my wedding hostage to force me to invite your pedophile brother? Watch your language, young lady. Richard was never convicted of anything. Because Sarah was too scared to press charges. Because you and Dad convinced her to keep it in the family and handle it quietly. I could feel tears threatening, but I forced them back. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing me cry. What about what you promised? What about family supporting family? Family does support family. That's exactly my point. He stood up slowly, all 6'2" of his 79-year-old frame still imposing. Richard is family. Sarah chose to make things difficult for everyone with her dramatics. You can choose differently. My phone buzzed with a text from David. How's it going with your grandpa? Can't wait to finalize the caterer. Love you, Sweet, trusting David, who had no idea his future wife was standing in a mansion, being blackmailed by her own grandfather. David, who'd already taken on extra shifts at the hospital to cover our portion of the wedding costs, who'd been so relieved when Grandpa offered to help. I need time to think. You have until Sunday. That's when the final payments are due, isn't it? 4 days. He was giving me 4 days to choose between my conscience and my wedding. I picked up my purse with shaking hands, stepping carefully around the broken champagne glass. I'll be in touch, Grandpa. But I already knew what I had to do. The drive home was a blur of tears and rage. I pulled into our apartment complex with no memory of actually driving, my hands still trembling as I gripped the steering wheel. David's car was already there. He'd gotten off his shift early to celebrate finalizing our wedding plans. I sat in the parking lot for 20 minutes, trying to figure out how to explain this nightmare. How do you tell the man you love that your grandfather is essentially pimping out your wedding to rehabilitate a child molester's reputation? David was cooking dinner when I walked in, humming off-key to some playlist he'd made. He looked so happy, so blissfully unaware that our entire future had just been weaponized. There's my beautiful bride-to-be. He wrapped me in a hug, and I nearly broke down right there. So, did your grandpa want to go over any last-minute details? I know he's been excited about the whole thing. I pulled back to look at his face, those kind brown eyes that had never seen the ugliness I'd just witnessed. David, we need to talk. His smile faltered. Uh-oh. That's never good. Did something happen with the venue? I told him everything. Watched his expression shift from confusion to disgust to the same helpless anger I felt churning in my chest. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment, just holding my hands. Jesus, Jess. What kind of person does that to their own granddaughter? The kind who cares more about family appearances than family safety. I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand. David, I can't invite him. I won't. Sarah's going to be my maid of honor. How could I put her through that? Of course you can't. We'll figure something else out. With what money? The words came out harsher than I intended. We've already put deposits down on everything. The venue, the caterer, the photographer, the flowers, that's $23,000 right there. Without Grandpa's money, we'd have to cancel everything or go into massive debt. David was quiet, and I could see him running calculations in his head. Even with his doctor's salary, $40,000 was a devastating blow just 4 days before payments were due. What if we had a smaller wedding? Something simple? Where? When? David, we sent out invitations 3 months ago. We have 200 people expecting to celebrate with us this Saturday. My dress alone cost $1,800. I felt hysteria creeping into my voice. And even if we could throw something together, it would still cost money we don't have. My phone rang. Mom's contact photo filled the screen, and my blood ran cold. Had Grandpa already called her? Hi, Mom. Jessica, honey, I just got the most interesting call from your grandfather. Her voice had that carefully controlled tone she used when she was furious but trying not to show it. He seems to think there was some kind of misunderstanding about Uncle Richard and your wedding. There it was. He was already working the family angles, probably calling everyone to spin his version of events before I could tell them the truth. There's no misunderstanding, Mom. He's demanding I invite Richard or he'll pull his financial support. A sharp intake of breath. Sweetheart, you know how Grandpa gets about family unity. Maybe if you just... No. The word came out like a gunshot. I'm not compromising on this. And if you're calling to convince me otherwise, this conversation is over. Jessica Marie, don't you dare hang up on me. We need to discuss this like adults. But I could already hear it in her voice, the same tone she'd used 30 years ago when she'd convinced teenage Sarah to stay quiet for the good of the family. The cycle was starting all over again. And I was done being complicit. Mom, let me ask you something. I gripped the phone tighter, David watching me with worried eyes. When you convinced Sarah to stay quiet all those years ago, did you actually believe you were protecting the family? Or did you just not want to deal with Grandpa's reaction? The silence stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. That's not fair, Jessica. You don't understand how complicated that situation was. I understand that a 14-year-old girl was assaulted and everyone chose Harold's comfort over her safety. My voice was getting louder, but I didn't care. And now he's trying to use my wedding to force that same girl, now a grown woman who still has nightmares, to sit in the same room as her abuser. Richard's family, honey. Sometimes we have to. Sarah's family too. I exploded. She's been nothing but loyal to this family for 30 years, never caused problems, never demanded justice. And this is how we repay her? David squeezed my shoulder, grounding me before I completely lost it. Your grandfather's not asking for much, Mom continued, her voice taking on that pleading quality I remembered from childhood arguments. Just one evening. Richard would probably keep to himself anyway. You know how he is at family gatherings. How he is? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You mean how he corners young women when no one's looking? How he makes inappropriate comments and everyone just laughs it off as Uncle Richard being Uncle Richard? Jessica, that's enough. No, it's not nearly enough. Because I guarantee you, if I give in to this blackmail, it won't stop here. Next it'll be family photos, then Christmas dinner, then Sarah's own kids' birthdays. Where does it end, Mom? Another long pause. When she spoke again, her voice was smaller. Your grandfather's 80th birthday party is next weekend. He's been planning it for months. He wants the family together. Oh my God. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. That's what this is really about. He doesn't want questions at his big party about why Richard isn't there. He's using my wedding as a practice run, isn't he? Get everyone comfortable with Richard being back in family events so his birthday photos look perfect. Sweetheart, please. You're reading too much into this. But I could hear the truth in her evasive tone. Harold Morrison, master manipulator, killing two birds with one stone. Force the family to accept Richard's return at my wedding, then ensure no one could object to his presence at the birthday celebration. Have you talked to Sarah about this? I asked quietly. Well, no, but. Then you need to. Because I already know what she'll say, and it's going to break your heart. She'll tell you she's fine with whatever the family needs, that she doesn't want to cause problems, that she can handle seeing him again. And you'll let her, because it's easier than standing up to Grandpa. I heard Mom's sharp intake of breath and knew I'd hit the mark. But here's the thing, I continued, feeling a strange calm settle over me. I'm not Sarah. I'm not 14 and scared and dependent on family approval. I'm a grown woman who can see this manipulation for exactly what it is. Jessica, if you don't invite Richard, your grandfather will never forgive you. You'll be cut off from the family money permanently. Think about your future with David, your children someday. My children? The words hit like a slap. You want me to think about my future children while actively enabling a child predator? Do you hear yourself right now? The line went dead. She'd actually hung up on me. David pulled me into his arms as I stared at the silent phone, the full weight of what was happening finally sinking in. This wasn't just about one wedding or one birthday party. This was war. I spent the night staring at the ceiling while David slept fitfully beside me, both of us pretending we weren't calculating wedding costs on our phones until 3 a.m. By morning, I'd made my decision. If Grandpa wanted to play family politics, I'd show him exactly how that game was played. My first call was to Sarah. Jess? It's barely 7 a.m. Is everything okay? Just hearing her voice made my chest tight. Sarah had always been more like an older sister than a cousin, only 8 years older than me. She'd been my babysitter, my confidant, the one who taught me about periods when Mom was too embarrassed. The thought of Harold forcing her to sit across from Richard at my wedding made me physically sick. Sarah, I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear me out before you say anything. I explained everything. Harold's ultimatum, Mom's call, the whole twisted scheme. With each word, the silence on the other end grew heavier. When I finished, Sarah was quiet for so long I thought the call had dropped. Sarah? I'm here. Her voice sounded very small. Jess, if this is what the family needs. Stop. I cut her off before she could finish the familiar script. Don't you dare sacrifice yourself again. This isn't what the family needs. This is what Harold wants, and there's a difference. But your wedding will happen exactly as planned, just without Harold's blood money. The certainty in my own voice surprised me. Sarah, I'm going to ask you something, and I want you to think before you answer. If you could go back 30 years and handle things differently, would you? Another long pause. Then, so quietly I almost missed it, every single day. Then let's handle things differently now. What do you mean? I took a deep breath, the plan crystallizing as I spoke. Harold's 80th birthday party is next Saturday. Big fancy affair, right? All his business associates, the country club crowd, everyone who matters in his social circle? Yes, it's supposed to be the event of the season. He's been planning it for over a year. What if no one from the family showed up? The sharp intake of breath told me she understood immediately. Jess, you can't be serious. I'm dead serious. He wants to use my wedding as a trial run for rehabilitating Richard? Fine. But he can't force family unity if there's no family there to unite. Your parents will never agree to that. Neither will Uncle Tom or Aunt Linda. They're too afraid of being cut off. Maybe. Or maybe they're just waiting for someone to give them permission to finally do the right thing. I started pacing, adrenaline flooding my system. Think about it, Sarah. How many family gatherings have been ruined because everyone's walking on eggshells around Richard? How many times have you had to leave early or skip events entirely because no one would stand up to Harold? More than I can count, she admitted. Your own daughter's graduation party. You missed Emma's graduation party last year because Richard was going to be there. I heard her sharp intake of breath. I'd hit another nerve. That's different. It's exactly the same. Harold's been holding this family hostage for 30 years, and we've all just accepted it as the price of keeping the peace. But what kind of peace is it really, Sarah? Who benefits from this arrangement besides Harold and Richard? She was crying now, soft sniffles she was trying to hide. I've spent so long trying not to rock the boat. The boat's already sinking, I said gently. We can either go down with it, or we can build something better. What about your wedding money? I looked at David, who'd been listening to my half of the conversation with growing determination in his eyes. He nodded encouragingly. We'll figure it out. But I won't build my marriage on a foundation of blackmail and abuse. That's not the legacy I want. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was stronger. What do you need me to do? First, I need you to help me understand exactly who we're dealing with, I said, settling into the kitchen chair with a notepad. How many family members usually show up to Harold's events? Sarah's voice grew more focused, like she was shifting into planning mode. For something this big? Probably 40 to 50 family members, plus another 100 business associates and country club friends. So if the family doesn't show, it'll be obvious. Devastatingly obvious. Harold always seats family at the head tables, right up front where everyone can see his dynasty. There was bitter irony in her voice. He loves showing off how loyal and united we all are. I scribbled notes as she talked. Who are the key players I need to convince? Well, there's your parents, obviously. Uncle Tom and Aunt Linda, they have the most kids, so that's another 8 people right there. Then there's my side, me, Mark, and the kids. Cousin Jennifer and her family from Portland, though they might not come anyway since it's expensive to fly out. What about the aunts and uncles on Harold's side? Aunt Margaret died 3 years ago. Uncle Robert is in assisted living and barely recognizes anyone. Really, it's just immediate descendants and their families. I did quick math. So we're talking about maybe 35 core family members? Something like that. But Jess, getting everyone to agree to this. Sarah's voice trailed off. Your dad has never stood up to Harold. Not once in 56 years. Then maybe it's time he learned how. My call to Dad went about as well as expected. Absolutely not, Jessica. I won't be part of whatever rebellion you're cooking up. I was sitting in my car outside the hospital where David worked, having driven there to think. Something about the parking lot helped me focus, maybe because it reminded me that there were bigger problems in the world than family drama. Dad, I'm not asking you to join a rebellion. I'm asking you to protect your niece. Sarah's a grown woman. She can protect herself. Really? Because she's been protecting herself for 30 years by avoiding family events. Is that the protection you're proud of providing? Silence. Dad hated when I called him out directly. Your grandfather has been good to this family, Jessica. He paid for your college, helped Tom buy his house, gave Linda the loan for her business. We don't bite the hand that feeds us. The hand that feeds us is the same hand that covered up child sexual assault. That's enough. His voice turned sharp. You're being dramatic, just like Sarah was? Is that what you were going to say? Another pause. I could practically hear him realizing he'd almost stepped on a landmine. Look, sweetheart, I understand you're upset about the wedding money. But Harold's not asking for something unreasonable. It's one evening. Dad, stop. I rubbed my temples, feeling a headache building. Let me ask you something. When Emma was born, Sarah's daughter, what did you think when you held her for the first time? What does that have to do with anything? Just answer the question. He sighed. I thought about how innocent she was. How perfect. How it was our job to protect her. Emma's 16 now. Same age Sarah was when it happened. If someone hurt Emma the way Richard hurt Sarah, what would you want the family to do? The silence stretched so long I thought he'd hung up. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. That's not fair, Jessica. It's the only fair question left, Dad. Because in 2 years, Emma will be 18 and maybe getting married herself. What precedent do we want to set for her about what this family tolerates? I can't. I need to think about this. You have until tomorrow. Because I'm calling everyone, and I want them to know where you stand. I hung up before he could argue, my hands shaking slightly. 1 down, 6 to go. But my phone was already ringing again. It was Aunt Linda, and she sounded furious. Harold just called me, Jessica. He's very upset. I'm sure he is, I said, gripping the phone tighter. What exactly did Grandpa tell you? That you're being ungrateful and trying to poison the family against him over some ancient history. Linda's voice had that clipped tone she used when she was trying to stay diplomatic but failing. He also mentioned something about organizing a boycott of his birthday party. I closed my eyes, leaning back against my car seat. Of course Harold was already working damage control, spinning the narrative before I could reach everyone myself. Classic power move, control the story, control the outcome. Aunt Linda, did he mention why I'm upset? Something about Richard and your wedding, but honestly Jessica, I don't understand why you're making such a big deal out of this. Richard's been to plenty of family events over the years without incident. Without incident? The words came out sharper than I intended. Linda, Sarah hasn't been to a family Christmas in 5 years because of Richard. She missed Emma's sweet 16 party last month. She skipped Tom's anniversary dinner. How is that without incident? A pause. Well, Sarah's always been sensitive about these things. There it was, the family party line that had enabled this nightmare for 3 decades. Sarah was just sensitive. Sarah was dramatic. Sarah needed to get over it for the good of everyone else. She was 14 when he assaulted her, Linda. In Grandpa's pool house during the 4th of July barbecue while everyone else was watching fireworks. She's not sensitive, she's traumatized. Jessica, you don't understand how complicated. Stop. I cut her off before she could finish the familiar script. Before you tell me how complicated this is, I need you to know something. Harold isn't just demanding Richard be invited to my wedding. He's using my wedding as a test run for his birthday party. He wants to make sure the family will accept Richard being back in the fold before his big celebration next weekend. The silence on Linda's end was telling. You already knew that, didn't you? Harold may have mentioned that he hoped this would be a chance for healing. Healing for who? Because it sure as hell isn't healing for Sarah. I started the car, needing to move, to do something with the restless energy building in my chest. Linda, I'm going to ask you the same question I asked Dad. If this was happening to one of your daughters, what would you want the family to do? That's different. My girls. Are what? More important than Sarah? More deserving of protection? No, of course not, but. Then there's no but. Either we protect family members who've been hurt, or we protect the people who hurt them. There's no middle ground here. I heard her sigh deeply, and for a moment, I thought I might be getting through to her. Jessica, I understand your principles, I really do. But you have to think practically. Harold's 80 years old. How many more years does he have left? Can't we just manage the situation until nature takes its course? The casual callousness of that statement hit me like a physical blow. We should just wait for Harold to die rather than stand up to him. Let Sarah continue suffering in silence for a few more years until the problem solved itself. Listen to yourself, Linda. You're asking a sexual assault survivor to endure her abuser's presence at family events until her grandfather dies. Do you hear how insane that sounds? I'm being realistic. You're being cowardly. The words flew out before I could stop them. You're all being cowardly. And Sarah deserves better from this family. The line went quiet except for Linda's sharp breathing. Harold won't just cut you off financially, she said finally. He'll make sure you're excluded from everything. Every family event, every holiday, every milestone. Your future children will grow up not knowing their great-grandfather or their extended family. Good, I said simply. If that's the price of protecting Sarah and maintaining my integrity, I'll pay it gladly. Jessica. But I'd already hung up, my heart pounding with a mixture of terror and fierce determination. 2 down. And Harold was already 3 moves ahead of me. This was going to be harder than I'd thought. The third call was to my Uncle Tom, and I could hear Harold's influence before Tom even finished saying hello. Jessica, sweetheart, your grandfather's very concerned about you. He thinks maybe you're having some pre-wedding stress. Uncle Tom, stop. I pulled into a coffee shop parking lot, needing caffeine for what was becoming a marathon day of family politics. I need you to listen to me, really listen, before you say anything else. Now, honey, I know Harold can be demanding, but he's family. So is Sarah. I took a deep breath, trying to channel some of the calm authority I'd heard David use with difficult patience. Tom, you have 3 daughters. The youngest just turned 13. I need you to imagine one of them in Sarah's situation. Jessica, that's not. Just imagine it. Imagine Caitlin at 14, imagine her being assaulted by a family member, and then imagine 30 years later being told she needs to sit at the same table as her attacker for the sake of family unity. The silence stretched longer this time, and I pressed my advantage. Now imagine that when she objects, when she can barely function at the thought of seeing him again, the family calls her sensitive and dramatic. Imagine everyone telling her to get over it for everyone else's convenience. Sarah's situation was different. How? The question came out like a gunshot. How was it different, Tom? Well, Richard was. He was drinking that night, and emotions were running high after Dad's funeral. Stop right there. My voice was ice cold. Did you just give me an excuse for why he assaulted a 14-year-old girl? No, I didn't mean. You absolutely did mean it. You just blamed Dad's death and alcohol for Richard sexually assaulting your teenage niece. I felt sick. Do you hear yourself right now? Tom was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke again, his voice was smaller. Look, Jessica, I know it wasn't right. But it was 30 years ago, and we handled it as a family. You handled it by covering it up and forcing Sarah to stay quiet. That's not handling it, that's being complicit. Your grandfather thought it was best. My grandfather thought it was best for him. What was best for Sarah never entered the equation. I grabbed my coffee harder than necessary, the heat burning through the cardboard sleeve. And now he's doing it again, using my wedding to rehabilitate Richard's image so his precious birthday party won't be awkward. You don't understand the position Harold was in back then. Richard's wife had just left him, he was drinking heavily, the whole family was grieving. And Sarah was a child. I exploded, causing several people in the parking lot to look over. I lowered my voice but kept the intensity. She was a grieving 14-year-old who'd just lost her grandfather, and instead of protecting her, you all protected her attacker. We were trying to keep the family together. By sacrificing the most vulnerable member. Real noble, Uncle Tom. The sarcasm in my voice seemed to hit him like a slap. He was quiet for several seconds before speaking again. What do you want me to do, Jessica? Even if I agreed with you, which I'm not saying I do, Harold controls the family finances. The business, the trust funds, everything. He could destroy us financially. And there it was. The real reason nobody had ever stood up to Harold Morrison. Fear. Not just fear of family drama or uncomfortable conversations, but genuine financial terror. Tom, how much are you worth? Honestly? I don't see how that's. Humor me. You've been working for Harold's construction company for 25 years, you own your house outright, your girls' college funds are set. What's your actual net worth? A pause. Maybe $800,000, including the house. So you're not exactly living paycheck to paycheck. But the girls' educations, the business, my retirement, Harold could take it all away if I cross him. I felt a strange calm settle over me as I realized something important. This wasn't really about money at all. It was about power, and the illusion of security that power provided. Uncle Tom, let me ask you something. What kind of man holds his family's financial security hostage to protect a child molester? Jessica. And what kind of family allows themselves to be held hostage? The question hung in the air between us like a challenge. The silence on Tom's end stretched uncomfortably long before he finally spoke, his voice tight with something between anger and desperation. You know what, Jessica? It's easy to take a moral high ground when you don't have 3 kids depending on you. When you're not responsible for 12 employees who've worked for the family company their whole careers. His words hit harder than I expected. I hadn't considered the ripple effects. Tom managed Harold's construction business, and a dozen families depended on those jobs. How many people does Harold really control through the business? I asked quietly. Directly? Maybe 40 employees across the company and the property management side. Indirectly? Hell, Jessica, half the contractors in this county do business with Morrison Construction. Your grandfather could blacklist someone from every major project in a 100-mile radius. The scope of Harold's influence was starting to sink in. This wasn't just about family dynamics, it was about an entire economic ecosystem built around his approval. But Tom, don't you see how that makes this worse, not better? He's not just covering up what Richard did, he's built a system where nobody can challenge him without destroying their livelihood. And you think the solution is to what, burn it all down? Destroy everyone's security to make a point? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Asterisk, this is Emma, Sarah's daughter. Mom told me what's happening. We need to talk. Can I call you? Asterisk. My stomach dropped. Sarah had told Emma, 16-year-old Emma, about the family crisis. which meant this was escalating beyond just the adults involved. Tom, I have to go. But think about what you just said. You're asking me to prioritize everyone's financial comfort over Sarah's safety and dignity. Is that really the family legacy you want to pass down to your daughters? Jessica, wait. But I was already ending the call to answer Emma's. My hands were shaking as I hit accept. Emma? Sweetheart, are you okay? Jess, I'm so scared. Her voice was small and young, reminding me that despite her maturity, she was still just a kid. Mom's been crying all morning, and she told me about Uncle Richard and what Grandpa Harold is doing to you. This was exactly what I'd been afraid of, the crisis spilling over onto the next generation. Emma, your mom shouldn't have. No, I'm glad she told me. I needed to know why we never go to family parties anymore, why Mom always gets weird around holidays. Emma's voice grew stronger, more determined. Jess, I've been thinking about what happened to Mom, and I remember things now. Weird things. My blood ran cold. What kind of things? Last Christmas, when we did go to Grandpa's house? Uncle Richard kept trying to hug me, and when I said no, he laughed and said I was just like my mother, too uptight. And he kept commenting on how I was developing into a young woman. I felt sick. Emma, did you tell your mom about this? I tried to, but she just said to stay away from him and not make a scene. But Jess, what if he tries something with me? What if staying quiet just gives him access to hurt someone else? The question hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Sarah had spent 30 years trying to protect herself by avoiding Richard, but she couldn't protect her daughter from him forever. Not if the family kept insisting on including him in gatherings. Emma, listen to me very carefully. You are never, ever required to be alone with him or accept physical contact you don't want. I don't care what any adult tells you about family respect or politeness. But what about the wedding? What about Grandpa Harold's money? Even the teenagers understood the financial stakes. Harold's manipulation had poisoned everything, making every family interaction a calculation of economic survival versus moral integrity. The money doesn't matter, Emma. Your safety and your mom's well-being matter more than any wedding. But you've been planning this for so long. And I'll figure something else out. Emma, I need you to promise me something. If your mom starts talking about maybe going to Harold's birthday party, about trying to handle seeing Richard for the family's sake, will you call me? She's already talking about it, Emma said quietly. She thinks maybe if she faces him once, proves she can handle it, everyone will stop walking on eggshells around the whole situation. My heart sank. Sarah was falling back into her old pattern of self-sacrifice, probably convinced that her trauma was less important than family harmony. Emma, that's not how trauma works. Forcing herself to see him won't heal anything, it'll just re-traumatize her for everyone else's convenience. I know that. I'm 16, not stupid. But how do I convince my mom? She spent my whole life trying to keep the peace. I stared out at the coffee shop parking lot, watching normal people go about their normal days while my family imploded in real time. A teenage girl was asking me how to protect her mother from making decisions based on 30 years of manipulation and gaslighting. Emma, what if I told you there might be a way to end this permanently? To make sure Richard never has access to hurt anyone in our family again? What do you mean? I took a deep breath, the plan crystallizing as I spoke. What if Harold's birthday party was completely empty of family? What if he had to sit in front of all his business associates and country club friends and explain why not a single relative showed up to celebrate him? You really think you can get everyone to boycott? I'm going to try. But Emma, I need you to help me with something. I need you to help me understand exactly what we're up against. Jess, there's something else, Emma's voice dropped to almost a whisper. Something Mom doesn't know about, and I don't think I should tell her because it would destroy her. My grip tightened on the phone. What is it, sweetheart? Last year at Uncle Tom's anniversary party, the one Mom skipped, I overheard Great-Grandpa Harold talking to some of his business friends. They were in his study, and I was looking for a bathroom. Emma's breathing sounded shaky. One of them asked why Mom never comes to family events anymore, and Harold said she was still carrying a grudge over some teenage nonsense and that Richard had learned his lesson years ago. The casual dismissal in Harold's words made my stomach turn, but Emma wasn't finished. Then Harold said something about how he'd handled the situation back then to protect the family reputation, and that he wasn't going to let one incident destroy decades of family unity. Her voice cracked slightly. But Jess, the way he said one incident, like he was talking about a broken window or something. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of Harold's calculated cruelty settling over me like a suffocating blanket. He wasn't just protecting Richard out of misguided family loyalty. He was actively minimizing Sarah's trauma to maintain his own image. There's more, Emma continued. One of the men asked if Harold thought Richard might act up again, and Harold laughed. He actually laughed and said, Richard knows better than to bite the hand that feeds him. The implication hit me like a physical blow. Harold wasn't just enabling Richard, he was controlling him, using financial leverage to manage his behavior just like he managed everyone else in the family. Emma, who else heard this conversation? That's the problem. Uncle Tom was there. He didn't say anything, just looked uncomfortable, but he definitely heard it. So Tom knew. Tom knew exactly how Harold really felt about Sarah's assault, knew that Harold saw it as nothing more than a reputation management problem, and he'd still tried to convince me to go along with the wedding ultimatum. My phone buzzed with another call, David calling from the hospital. Emma, I need to take this, but we're not done talking. Are you somewhere safe right now? I'm at school. Mom doesn't know I called you, she thinks I'm in calculus. Good. Don't tell her about our conversation yet. I need to process this information first. I switched over to David's call, my mind reeling from Emma's revelations. Jess, thank God. I've been getting calls all morning. David sounded stressed, which was unusual. Emergency medicine had given him an almost supernatural calm. Your dad called the hospital looking for you, then your mom called crying, then someone named Linda who seemed to think I could talk sense into you. Harold's mobilizing the troops, I said grimly. He's calling everyone before I can reach them, controlling the narrative. It gets worse. I just got a call from the wedding venue. Apparently, someone called claiming to be your grandfather and said there might be family complications affecting Saturday's event. They're asking if we want to discuss contingency plans. My blood ran cold. Harold was already applying pressure to our vendors, probably hoping to force us into a corner by making the wedding logistics impossible to manage. David, he can't legally cancel our contracts. No, but he can make our lives hell. The florist called 20 minutes ago asking about payment concerns that someone had raised. Jess, I think he's systematically contacting every vendor we're using. I leaned back against my car seat, the full scope of Harold's counterattack becoming clear. He wasn't just threatening to withdraw his financial support, he was actively sabotaging what we'd already paid for. How many vendors has he contacted? So far? The venue, the florist, and the photographer. Probably more that haven't called us yet. This was psychological warfare, designed to make us feel powerless and isolated until surrendering seemed like the only rational choice. But Harold had made one crucial miscalculation. He'd underestimated how far I was willing to go to protect Sarah. And now I had information that could destroy him. David, I need you to listen to me very carefully, I said, watching a young mother push her toddler on the swings across the street. Normal life continuing while mine imploded. Harold isn't just threatening us anymore. He's actively sabotaging our wedding, and I think I know why. What do you mean? I told him about Emma's phone call, about Harold's casual dismissal of Sarah's assault as teenage nonsense, about Tom knowing the truth and still trying to manipulate me into compliance. The silence on David's end stretched so long I wondered if the call had dropped. Jesus Christ, he finally whispered. Jess, this is so much worse than we thought. It's systematic psychological abuse spanning 3 decades. Harold's been controlling this entire family through financial manipulation while protecting a predator. My voice was getting stronger as the pieces clicked into place. And now Emma's at risk because Sarah can't protect her daughter without losing everything. What do we do? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed with yet another call. This time it was Jennifer, my cousin from Portland, and I had a sinking feeling about why she was reaching out. David, I need to take this. It's Jennifer. Jess, wait. But I'd already switched calls, bracing myself for another round of Harold's damage control. Jennifer? Please tell me you're not calling to convince me to invite Richard to my wedding. Actually, I'm calling to say I'm proud of you for standing up to him. Her voice was tight with an emotion I couldn't identify. And to tell you something I should have said 30 years ago. My heart stopped. What do you mean? I was there that night, Jess. The 4th of July when Richard hurt her. I was 17, sneaking cigarettes behind the pool house with my boyfriend. Jennifer's voice cracked. I heard her crying. I heard her tell him to stop. The parking lot seemed to tilt around me. Jennifer, are you saying? I'm saying I was a coward. I was 17 and scared, and when I heard what was happening, I grabbed my boyfriend and we ran. We left her there with him. The words came out in a rush, like she'd been holding them back for decades. The next day, when the adults were all whispering about this situation and how it needed to be handled quietly, I told myself it wasn't my business. That Sarah would be okay. My hands were shaking so hard I nearly dropped the phone. Jennifer. But she wasn't okay, was she? She's never been okay. And I've spent 30 years watching her disappear from family events, watching her daughter grow up isolated from all of us, knowing I could have stopped it if I'd just been brave enough to scream for help. The weight of her confession settled over me like lead. Sarah had a witness. Someone who could corroborate her story, who could prove that what happened wasn't some misunderstanding or teenage nonsense. Does Harold know you were there? I don't think so. Nobody saw us that night except. Jennifer paused, and I heard her sharp intake of breath. Oh God, Jess. My boyfriend that night was Danny Morrison. Harold's grandson from his first marriage. The world tilted again. Danny Morrison, Harold's golden boy, the one being groomed to take over the family business. If Danny had witnessed Richard assaulting Sarah. Jennifer, where is Danny now? That's the thing. He moved to Seattle right after college and cut contact with Harold completely. Never explained why, just disappeared from family events. Harold always said Danny was too sensitive for business, but now I'm wondering. If Danny had also been threatened into silence, or worse, if Harold had other secrets he was protecting, other family members he'd manipulated or covered for over the years. Jennifer, I need you to help me contact Danny. I don't know if he'll talk to anyone from the family. He's been radio silent for 15 years. Try anyway. Because I think Harold's birthday party is about to become a lot more interesting than he planned. My phone was buzzing again, this time with a text from an unknown number. Asterisk, this is Danny Morrison. Jennifer gave me your number. We need to talk. There are things about Harold you don't know. Meet me tomorrow at Riverside Park, 2 p.m. Come alone, asterisk. I stared at the message, my heart pounding. Whatever Danny knew, it was serious enough that he'd broken 15 years of silence to reach out. Harold thought he was fighting to control one rebellious granddaughter. But he was about to face the reckoning he'd spent 3 decades avoiding. And I was going to make sure the entire family, and everyone at his precious birthday party, learned the truth about exactly who Harold Morrison really was. The meeting with Danny was supposed to happen at 2 p.m., but at 1:30, my phone rang with Sarah's number flashing on the screen. Her voice was shaking when I answered. Jess, something's happened. Harold showed up at my house this morning. My blood turned to ice. What do you mean he showed up? He was sitting in his car when I got home from the grocery store. Just waiting. I could hear the tremor in her voice, the same scared girl she'd been 30 years ago. He wanted to clear the air about the wedding situation. I was already in my car, driving toward Riverside Park, but I pulled over to focus completely on Sarah's words. What did he say? He was so calm, Jess. That's what made it terrifying. He said he understood I had complicated feelings about Richard, but that sometimes we have to rise above our personal discomfort for the greater good. Sarah's laugh was bitter. He actually used the phrase personal discomfort to describe what Richard did to me. Sarah, please tell me you didn't. I didn't agree to anything. But Jess, he knows about Emma. The words hit me like a physical blow. What do you mean he knows about Emma? He mentioned how proud he was of her, how she was growing into such a lovely young woman, how it would be a shame if family divisions affected her college prospects. Sarah's voice cracked. The Morrison Family Foundation gives full scholarships to family members, remember? Emma's been counting on that money since she was 10. Another layer of Harold's control revealed. He wasn't just threatening the current generation, he was holding the next generation's futures hostage too. Then he said something that made my skin crawl, Sarah continued. He said Richard had specifically mentioned how much Emma had blossomed at the last family gathering, and how he was looking forward to watching her continue to mature at future events. My grip tightened on the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. Harold wasn't just enabling Richard's past behavior, he was setting up future opportunities. Sarah, you and Emma are not going to Harold's birthday party. But if I don't prove I can handle being in the same room as Richard, Harold will assume I'm still unstable about the whole thing. And Emma's scholarship. There will be other scholarships. But there won't be another Emma if we let Richard have access to her. I could hear Sarah crying softly, the sound of a woman who'd spent 3 decades carrying trauma alone. Jess, Harold also said something else. He said he'd heard I was filling Emma's head with stories and that it would be unfortunate if those stories started affecting other young family members. The threat was clear, stay quiet, or Harold would make sure everyone knew Sarah was poisoning the next generation against poor, misunderstood Richard. Sarah, I'm about to meet with someone who might have information that changes everything. Can you stay somewhere safe until I call you back? I'm at my sister's house in the next town over. Emma's at school, and I've already called to make sure she goes straight to her friend's house afterward. Smart. Sarah was finally taking protective action instead of just enduring. My phone buzzed with another text from Danny, * change of plans. Harold's having me followed. Meet at the old Miller farm on Route 47. The red barn in the back field. 3 p.m. *. Harold was having his own grandson followed. The level of paranoia and control was staggering. But as I drove toward what felt like a clandestine spy meeting, one thought kept echoing in my mind. If Harold was this desperate to control the narrative, if he was willing to threaten Emma and have family members surveilled, what exactly was he hiding? And more importantly, how many other victims were there that we didn't know about? The Miller farm had been abandoned for years, its red barn standing like a monument to better times in a field of overgrown weeds. I parked behind the structure, my heart hammering as I checked my mirrors for any sign I'd been followed. Danny was already there, leaning against a rusted tractor. At 32, he still had the Morrison height and jawline, but there was something haunted in his eyes that reminded me of Sarah. The look of someone carrying secrets that had eaten away at them for years. Jessica. He nodded, not bothering with pleasantries. I wasn't sure you'd come. I wasn't sure you'd show either. 15 years is a long time to stay silent. His laugh was bitter. Not long enough, apparently. He pulled out his phone, showed me a series of missed calls from Harold. He's been trying to reach me since yesterday. Probably figured out that Jennifer contacted me. Danny, what really happened that night at the 4th of July party? For a moment, he just stared out at the empty field. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Jennifer told you we witnessed what Richard did to Sarah. What she doesn't know is that I tried to stop it. His hands clenched into fists. I was 17, thought I was tough. I walked around to the front of the pool house and told Richard to leave her alone. My stomach dropped. What did he do? He laughed. Said Sarah was asking for it by wearing a swimsuit around grown men. Then he told me to run along and find kids my own age to play with. Danny's voice turned rough. So I went to find Harold. Told him exactly what was happening. And? Harold listened very carefully, then patted my shoulder and said he'd handle the situation. He told me to keep quiet about what I'd seen, that these things were better dealt with privately. Danny met my eyes, and I saw the guilt he'd been carrying. I believed him, Jess. I actually believed he was going to protect Sarah. But he didn't. The next morning, I heard Harold on the phone with someone, probably his lawyer. He was talking about damage control and reputation management. Then I heard him call Sarah's father and arrange the family meeting where they convinced her to stay quiet. The pieces were falling into place, painting a picture of calculated manipulation that went far deeper than I'd imagined. Danny, why did you really cut contact with Harold? He was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then he pulled out his wallet and handed me a photograph, Harold at some business dinner, arm around a teenage boy who looked uncomfortable. That's Harold's business partner's son, Marcus. He was 16 in that photo. Danny's voice was flat, emotionless. 3 months after the Sarah incident, I caught Harold alone with Marcus in his office after hours. The door was locked, the boy was crying, and Harold was. Jesus Christ. I confronted Harold privately, told him I'd witnessed 2 incidents now and would go to the police if it happened again. Danny's hands were shaking slightly. You know what he said? He told me I had an overactive imagination and that making wild accusations could destroy my college prospects. Then he handed me a check for $50,000, an early inheritance, he called it. Hush money. Blood money. I took it because I was 18 and terrified and convinced myself that maybe I had misunderstood what I saw. Danny's voice cracked. I used that money for college, then spent the next 15 years telling myself I'd imagined the whole thing. My phone buzzed urgently, a text from Emma, * something's wrong. Mom won't stop crying and won't tell me why. Please come, *. Harold's morning visit had done more damage than Sarah had let on. Danny, I have to go. But I need to know, will you tell this story publicly? He stared at the photo in his hands. If it means protecting other kids? Yeah. I should have spoken up years ago. As I drove away from the barn, one terrifying thought consumed me. If Harold had been covering up abuse for decades, how many victims were still out there, still silent, still carrying his secrets? And how far would he go to keep them quiet? I arrived at Sarah's sister's house to find Emma sitting on the front porch steps, her face streaked with tears. At 16, she looked younger than usual, vulnerable in a way that made my chest tight with protective fury. She locked herself in the bathroom, Emma said without preamble. She's been in there for 2 hours. I can hear her crying, but she won't answer when I knock. I sat down beside her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. What happened after I talked to you earlier? Great-Grandpa Harold called the house around noon. I answered because Mom was in the shower. Emma's voice was shaky. He said he wanted to clarify some things about our family conversation this morning. Then he started asking me questions. My blood ran cold. What kind of questions? Weird ones. Like whether Mom had been sharing inappropriate stories about Uncle Richard, and whether I felt confused about family dynamics. Emma looked up at me with eyes too old for her face. But then he said something that really scared me. What? He asked if I was looking forward to college and mentioned how the Morrison Scholarship could open doors for my future. But the way he said it felt like... She paused, struggling for words. Like he was reminding me what I had to lose if I said the wrong thing. Harold was now directly intimidating a 16-year-old. The man had no boundaries left. Then when Mom got out of the shower and saw I was on the phone with him, she grabbed it away from me. I could only hear her side of the conversation, but Jess, she kept saying please don't and she's just a child. Emma started crying again. What did he threaten to do to me? Before I could answer, my phone rang. David's name on the screen. I need to take this quickly, I told Emma, then answered. David, now isn't. Jess, listen to me. Harold just showed up at the hospital. David's voice was tight with barely controlled anger. He cornered me in the parking lot after my shift. What did he want? To inform me that he'd done some research into my background. Apparently, there are questions about my student loan payments during medical school, and he'd hate for the hospital administration to receive anonymous tips about potential financial irregularities. My mouth went dry. David, your loans were completely legitimate. I know that, and you know that. But Harold made it clear he could manufacture enough suspicion to make my life hell. Delayed license renewals, Medicare audit flags, professional review board complaints. David's voice cracked slightly. Jess, he could destroy my medical career with a few well-placed phone calls. The scope of Harold's retaliation was expanding beyond anything I'd imagined. He wasn't just threatening family members, he was going after my fiancé's profession. There's more, David continued. He suggested that perhaps I could help you see reason about the wedding situation, and that once Richard was properly included in family events, all these potential problems would simply disappear. Emma was watching my face, reading my growing horror with the intuitive intelligence of someone who'd grown up navigating family dysfunction. He threatened David too, didn't he? She asked quietly. I nodded, feeling the weight of Harold's systematic campaign settling over me like a suffocating blanket. He was attacking on multiple fronts: Sarah's emotions, Emma's future, David's career, our wedding vendors. Classic psychological warfare designed to isolate us and make resistance seem impossible. But Harold had made one crucial error in his calculations. He'd pushed too hard, too fast, and now his pattern of manipulation was becoming visible to everyone involved. Emma, I need you to do something for me, I said, an idea crystallizing. I need you to call your Uncle Tom and tell him exactly what Harold said to you on the phone today. Why? Because Tom has 3 daughters your age, and he needs to understand that Harold isn't just protecting Richard, he's actively grooming the next generation for manipulation. Sometimes the best way to win a war is to make sure your enemy's allies finally see who they're really fighting for. Emma's hands were shaking as she dialed Tom's number, but her voice was steady when he answered. I could hear his booming laugh through the speaker as he said hello, completely oblivious to what was coming. Uncle Tom, it's Emma. I need to tell you about a phone call I had with Great-Grandpa Harold today. The change in Tom's tone was immediate. Emma, sweetheart, you shouldn't be getting involved in adult business. He made it adult business when he started threatening my college scholarship, Emma said with a maturity that broke my heart. Uncle Tom, he asked me if Mom had been telling me inappropriate stories about Uncle Richard. Then he reminded me how much the Morrison Scholarship meant to my future. I watched Emma's face harden as she continued, channeling a strength I recognized from Sarah at her best moments. But here's what really bothered me, Uncle Tom. He asked if I was excited about growing up and said Uncle Richard had mentioned how much I'd matured lately. Why would Uncle Richard be thinking about my body at all? The silence from Tom's end stretched uncomfortably long. Emma looked at me, and I nodded encouragingly. Uncle Tom? Are you still there? Emma. Tom's voice sounded strangled. Did Harold really say those exact words? Every single one. And Uncle Tom, I need you to think about something. If Great-Grandpa Harold is willing to use my scholarship to control what I'm allowed to know about family history, what's he willing to do to control Caitlin when she turns 16 next year? That question hit like a bomb. I could practically hear Tom's worldview shifting through the phone. Emma, put Jessica on the phone. I took the phone, my heart racing. Tom? I need to know everything. Right now. No more family politics, no more protecting Harold's feelings. What the hell is really going on? For the next 20 minutes, I told Tom everything. Danny's witness account, Harold's systematic threats against David's career, his intimidation of Emma, his casual dismissal of Sarah's assault as teenage nonsense. With each revelation, Tom's breathing grew heavier. Jesus Christ, Jessica. You're telling me Harold's been covering up multiple incidents? I'm telling you Harold's been running a protection racket for sexual predators while holding the entire family's financial security hostage. My voice was getting stronger with each word. And now he's targeting Emma the same way he targeted Sarah 30 years ago. Emma's just a kid. So was Sarah. So was Marcus, Harold's business partner's son. So was whoever else we don't know about yet. I stood up, pacing Sarah's sister's driveway. Tom, how many times have you told your daughters to be polite to Uncle Richard at family events? How many times have you left them alone with him because challenging him wasn't worth the family drama? The silence told me everything I needed to know. My God, Tom whispered. Caitlin mentioned last Christmas that Uncle Richard kept complimenting her dress, kept asking her to sit on his lap for photos. I told her she was being dramatic when she said it made her uncomfortable. My stomach turned. The pattern was already repeating itself with Tom's daughters. Tom, I need to know right now, are you willing to protect these girls, or are you going to keep enabling their abuse for Harold's convenience? What do you need me to do? Before I could answer, Emma grabbed my arm, her face pale with terror. She was staring at something over my shoulder. I turned to see Harold's black Mercedes pulling slowly up the street, like a shark circling wounded prey. He'd found us. The Mercedes stopped directly in front of the house, and Harold Morrison stepped out with the deliberate confidence of a man who'd never faced real consequences. At 79, he still cut an imposing figure, tall, silver-haired, wearing a perfectly tailored suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. Emma instinctively moved closer to me as Harold approached, his cold smile never wavering. Jessica, Emma. What a pleasant surprise to find you both here. His voice carried that familiar tone of controlled authority. I was hoping we could finish our conversation from this morning. We have nothing to discuss, I said, stepping protectively in front of Emma. Oh, but we do. Harold's eyes fixed on Emma with predatory calculation. I think there's been some confusion about family expectations, and I'd hate for anyone to make decisions they might regret. That's when Sarah emerged from the house, her face streaked with tears but her posture straighter than I'd seen it in years. Behind her came her sister Linda, holding a phone. Harold, Sarah said quietly, I want you to leave. Now. Harold's mask slipped for just a moment, surprise flickering across his features. He wasn't used to direct confrontation from Sarah. Now, sweetheart, let's not be dramatic. I'm done being quiet. Sarah's voice grew stronger with each word. I'm done protecting your reputation while you threaten my daughter. I'm done letting you control this family through fear. Harold's expression darkened. Sarah, you're clearly upset. Perhaps we should discuss this privately. No more private discussions. I pulled out my phone, hitting the record button. Everything you say from now on is going on the record. You little, Harold caught himself, but not before his true nature showed through the polished facade. That's when Tom's truck came roaring up the street, followed by Jennifer's rental car, then David's Honda. Car doors slammed in rapid succession as my hastily assembled army of witnesses surrounded Harold on the quiet suburban street. Tom, what's the meaning of this? Harold demanded, but for the first time, uncertainty crept into his voice. The meaning, Tom said, his face flushed with righteous anger, is that I just spent an hour hearing about 30 years of abuse you've been covering up. He looked directly at Harold. Including threats against my daughters. Danny stepped out of Jennifer's car, and Harold's face went completely white. Hello, Grandpa, Danny said quietly. I think it's time we had that conversation about Marcus Peterson. Harold actually stumbled backward, his composure finally cracking completely. Danny, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. You've been protecting predators and silencing victims for decades. Danny held up his phone. And I just finished giving a detailed statement to Detective Rivera about everything I witnessed. The color drained from Harold's face as the implications sank in. Police involvement meant official records, real consequences, the end of his ability to control the narrative through intimidation and money. You have a choice, I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. You can withdraw from family events permanently and stop threatening everyone, or we can make this very public at your birthday party tomorrow night. Harold looked around at the circle of family members, seeing his empire of fear finally crumbling. For a moment, he seemed every bit of his 79 years, not a powerful patriarch, but a frightened old man watching his secrets finally come to light. This isn't over, he said quietly. Yes, it is, Sarah said firmly. It's been over for 30 years. We just finally found the courage to say it out loud. As Harold drove away in defeat, I realized something profound had shifted. The wedding would happen, smaller, simpler, but free from the taint of blood money. More importantly, the next generation would grow up in a family where speaking truth was valued more than keeping peace. Sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to be silenced anymore.